Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive global success story. We're looking at a business model that took a totally simple, inexpensive product and turned it into an absolute juggernaut, literally generating billions in global sales. So let's deconstruct the billion-dollar recipe behind KFC's worldwide empire. Here is the central mystery that baffles so many people. How exactly does KFC make billions selling cheap meals? I mean, really think about it. We're talking about a company operating in over 150 countries. They have tens of thousands of restaurants, and they serve millions of us every single day. So there's this fascinating paradox going on. On one side, you've got a cheap bucket of fried chicken, some fries, maybe a drink, and it often costs less than a meal at practically any other restaurant. But on the other side, a multi-billion-dollar global empire. So how do they bridge that massive gap? Well, the answer isn't just the chicken itself. It's an incredibly sophisticated mix of pricing psychology, massive scale, and a brilliantly structured franchise model.
Which brings us to Section 1, Menu Psychology and Pricing, the front-of-house illusion.
It all starts with a super powerful concept called the loss leader. This is actually pretty fascinating. The absolute cheapest, most aggressively advertised meal on the KFC menu, that's usually not the product they want to profit from the most. Nope, that cheap meal is literally just a lure. Its entire purpose is to get you to walk through the front doors or, open up their mobile app. Let's walk through how this plays out in real life. Step 1, you're lured in by that irresistible cheap chicken deal. But once you're there, step 2 kicks in. You decide to add a drink, maybe a dessert. Oh, and some extra fries for sure. Those add-ons are the secret weapon because they have incredibly high profit margins. I mean, a fountain drink costs practically pennies to produce but sells for a couple of bucks. And that naturally leads to step 3. Your final bill ends up being significantly higher than that initial advertised price that caught your eye in the first place. When you actually break down those profit margins, a totally surprising reality emerges. The vast majority of the profits are coming from the drinks and the fries, not that promotional chicken. The chicken is just what gets you in the seat. But the potatoes and the soda, that's what actually builds the empire. And this brings us right to the power of the combo meal. Combos are a brilliant psychological trick. When you're staring up at the menu, adding a drink and fries as part of a combo feels like this fantastic deal compared to buying everything separately. But in reality, this strategy is quietly increasing the average amount every single customer spends. We're only talking about an increase of maybe $1 or $2 per person here, but hold on to that thought because when you multiply that by millions of daily visitors, it becomes a real game changer. All right, moving to Section 2, Scale, Speed, and Efficiency, the back-of-house reality. If you want to know how KFC keeps those base prices so low and attractive, it all comes down to unbelievable buying power. We call this economies of scale. Just imagine the sheer volume of ingredients it takes to feed millions of people every single day. KFC is buying millions of kilograms of chicken, potatoes, flour, cooking oil, packaging, the whole shebang. Because they're buying in such massive, unimaginable quantities from global supply chains, suppliers are giving them rock-bottom prices that a local independent restaurant could literally never get. So their cost per meal plummets, which leaves room for healthy profits even on the cheapest meals. And once all those cheap ingredients arrive at the restaurant, they enter a hyper-efficient system of standardized kitchens. Everything is exactly uniform. We're talking exact recipes, super strict cooking times, the exact same equipment in every single branch, and carefully monitored inventory. This strict control does 3 big things. It speeds up the service so they can handle way more customers per hour, it dramatically cuts down on food waste, and it keeps their labor costs tightly under control. Okay, let's get into Section 3, the secret franchise system. This is the corporate secret.
Now, here is a wild truth. KFC, as a parent company, doesn't actually own most of its restaurants. Seriously, the vast majority of Yum Brands locations are franchised, so the independent franchisee is the one taking on all the daily operating costs and carrying that heavy financial risk. Meanwhile, the corporate parent, they're collecting large upfront fees just to let people use their recipes and operating systems. Plus, they get ongoing royalties based on sales. So the parent company earns revenue from thousands of restaurants without ever sweating the daily overhead. It is an absolutely masterful transfer of risk.
Let's look at the bigger view in Section 4, Global Marketing and Technology. The global picture. First off, there is just massive consumer trust in that famous red and white Colonel Sanders logo. We tend to choose the familiar because we want consistent quality, right? Then you layer on marketing tactics like limited time offers to create a sense of urgency. You throw in modern tech like mobile apps that make getting delivery just a quick tap away. And finally, localization. Depending on where you are in the world, the menu totally adapts. You might find spicy rice bowls in Asia, or even the chizza, which is literally a chicken crust pizza, to appeal to local tastes. That brings in a huge, diverse audience without ever needing to change their fundamental business model.
And we can't forget the emotional component, because KFC leans heavily into emotional marketing. Those iconic large family buckets, they aren't just a sneaky way to sell more chicken, though they for sure increase the total order value, but they're positioned as a way to share a meal, to gather around the table with family and celebrate. The consumer feels like they're getting an awesome value for a group, while the brand builds real warmth and loyalty. And of course, successfully drives up the overall spend.
So how does it all add up? Section 5. The billion-dollar math. The grand total. $1. Seriously, just think about earning a tiny profit of exactly $1 from a single customer. On its own, it doesn't sound like much at all. It definitely doesn't sound like the foundation of an unstoppable global empire. But the absolutely crucial point is right here. KFC does not depend on making huge, sweeping margins off of a single meal. A $1 profit seems completely insignificant. But when you have millions of customers visiting every single day, that tiny margin explodes into millions of dollars in daily earnings, and billions over time. It's a business built entirely on extreme efficient volume.
Which leaves us with this final question to chew on. The next time you grab a bucket of chicken, what are you really paying for? Because as we've seen throughout this explainer, you aren't just buying fried chicken. You are stepping into a perfectly tuned machine built on decades of psychological pricing, masterful supply chain management, and brilliant global marketing, all working silently together behind the scenes. And that is the real recipe that turns a cheap meal into a billion-dollar empire. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning what's really happening behind the counter.